Hi, my name is Michael, and I'll be walking you through my STEM Pathways project. So, STEM Pathways was brought up to me freshman year as an opportunity to consolidate one idea that I was passionate about and execute it for either a semester or a whole year. And I chose to do a whole year. And the concept that I chose to dive into was waste management. Uh, Living in Kenya for my entire life, I've seen waste on the side of roads, thrown out the windows of cars, and etc. And of course, since the plastic bag ban, that waste has decreased, but it's still here. And components like plastic won't degrade for our lifetimes at least. So I wanted to create a sustainable solution to try and combat waste in like beautiful, scenic, maybe remote locations such as Mount Kenya. Um, During my freshman IC trip, I was exposed to trash buildup near like various sites on the mountain, and I was disturbed by the fact that everywhere that you could possibly go had plastic waste, and in these remote locations, especially, there was no effective way to deal with it because of the altitude and the harsh weather. There was no roads, there was no garbage systems to pick up the trash and move it to a proper dump site, and it was just there in the wild. So initially, I wanted to come up with a garbage compactor, but the issue of storing these compacted garbage bricks came up, and in reality, it just minimized the issue instead of effectively combating it. So eventually, I switched to the idea of a, a mobile incinerator that would burn garbage at such a high temperature that some harmful chemicals that would be airbound would break down. And then maybe we could filter that afterwards. And in Kenya, burning garbage is a very familiar sight. You'll see it on the side of the road. But a key difference would be putting that all in an incinerator in a controlled environment and burning it at a high temperature to ensure that the emissions were minimized. So my design problem was to build a waste disposal system that could operate in remote locations that had trash that was harming wildlife, water purity, soil health, and various other things. So I mentioned that currently in remote locations across Kenya, there's no effective ways and strategies to combat trash buildup, such as plastics and metals and cardboard that not only like harm us, will not only like impede us enjoying an experience visually, but does have real world consequences on both humans and animals living in the area. So, my design process was, um, to say it, not as straightforward as I thought it would be. Creating an incinerator that was effective and somewhat portable was a major issue that I came across. So, I the first thing I did was laid out success criteria to check off, and knowing that a successful design would check off most, if not all of them. So, setting off on this, I realized that an incinerator would have to be number one, durable, number two, effective, and portable, as well as being able to deal with harsh conditions and non optimal fuel sources such as garbage. So, I would like to take you through what I planned, my design process, and basically what I was working with this entire year. So, as you'll see as I scroll down, I have some basic, early, very early aspects of my design and some of the like the beginnings of actually making an incinerator. So if I'll take you to my Google sites, I have everything laid out. So because this is a STEM course, I needed to operate within the confines that I was given. So I had to uh, create my idea within the design cycle. So I have my define and identify. So I've defined the issues, identify problems, etc. But the real meat and potatoes of my work was research and brainstorming and then testing and data collection. So going through my site, you can see my initial idea of garbage compaction and then my secondary and better idea of incineration. So looking at incineration, of course, I looked at large scale incineration throughout the world that's used to compact to to combat waste in confined areas. And of course, through the design process, I had to have research questions like what are the pros and cons of incineration? While incineration greatly reduces the volume of garbage, it does have the capacity to release harmful chemicals into the air. And minimizing the harmful science of the incineration became a key issue in my research. So I explored filtration as one of my ideas, and looking at filtration, I found that there were three major ways that I could filter air. There were first carbon filters, then HEPA filters, which are used in hospitals, and then catalytic converters, which are used in cars, motorcycles, and other various like heavy machinery. So the issues I came across that were that carbon filters were not capable of handling high heat for long periods of time and would have to be swapped out pretty often. Secondly, HEPA filters, though used in medical grade situations and able to filter out tiny particles within the air, were not going to be effective for my job because they, though they're good at filtering particulates, gases and compounds which are air bound were harder for them to filter, as well as the issue of being able to withstand high temperature environments. So I looked at catalytic converters, which I think is the optimal way to go because the job that I wanted to do for the incinerator is very similar to what they do in vehicles. Taking harmful airbound chemicals such as heavy metals and running them through a system that captures them effectively at high temperatures. One of my other research questions was how can an incinerator be powered? Because the incinerator is not like a self-burning fire and is not a bonfire, so to speak, it needs some way to power it and give it in sufficient amounts of air for it to work at a very high heat. So because of the lack of electricity on remote locations, I needed to explore alternative energy. So I knew that things like wind energy were not going to be efficient because building a turbine just to power an incinerator would not be optimal, as well as the lack of wind power within certain remote locations, which would mean that would be less generally applicable within Kenya. Uh, I then explored solar panels, but the issues I came across were so solar panels would require an electric system, may require good weather, and would only collect energy during the day, as well as being expensive, which crossed out a large portion of what I wanted to do. Because I want this incinerator to be in rural areas, it has to be cheap to repair and the parts must be accessible. So, the idea that I took and ran with was manual power. So, I explored ideas such as hand cranks, bellows, and pedal power. So, I knew that hand cranks and bellows would be more compact than pedals, but harder to use, required more energy, and would not be easy or sustainable for long periods of time. Just based on how the body moves, I thought that pedal power would be the best way to move forward with this. And then looking at my testing and data collection, the testing that we did was we wanted to control the variables such as wind speed with a constant speed provided by a dust blower. So while while in the design process looking for inspiration, I needed criteria for success just to check up on and see if I was on the right trajectory with my project. So I said that the incinerator must be a long-term solution that combats like unmanaged refuse that could have like many different components within it. It must outperform traditional methods like just setting garbage aflame without anything, and it must outperform things such as burn barrels, which are also pretty widely used. So I went on to take inspiration from burn barrels because they are a simple way to burn garbage at a slightly higher temperature within a more controlled environment, and it's easier to process large amounts of refuse in a small area. So I mentioned that uh, the pros of burn barrels, which are they're compact, they store the ash from any burned material, and can prevent any debris and like coals from bouncing around and starting any fires in unwanted places. So I said that a design close to a burn barrel would be optimal because it's simple, it's cheap, and it's compact. So researching ideas for burn barrel adjacent designs for an incinerator, I came across a very useful source, which was an Autodesk instruction manual by Joe Andolina. So taking inspiration from this, which is a multi-page PDF with instructions on how to build what you see in this image, I took measurements on what would be applicable for us with the barrels that we had access to and sent them off for them to be cut. Then they were welded by Mr. Ferris and put together, which you can see. Sorry, which you can see down here as the complete thing. So I during the testing I wanted to have like a concrete list of variables that I could refer to just to determine success. So dependent, independent variables, why they needed to be there, why they were important to the experiment, and how I could keep them under control or how I could measure them. So moving on to the testing, We tested we tested 3 times in total, 3 successful tests under different conditions with different compositions of garbage, as well as different moisture levels and different fan speeds. So play. So as you can see, the incinerator is a circular design where the exhaust over here, the intake over here, spins through this metal apparatus down into the barrel, creating a fire vortex, and then up through the exhaust, which has a filter underneath, if you can see here, which prevents any ashes, coal, or any other debris that could be present from escaping the exhaust and contaminating the environment outside of this. As you can see, we set the material on fire before, and using a dust blower, we simulated air from a bicycle that we thought we'd be capable of producing on a pedal powered system. And if you look closely, you can see the heat radiating from the outside of the barrel and coming from the exhausts. I don't know if you saw that, but there were just flames coming off from here. So this is my STEM Pathways project, and I hope you found it interesting.